Back in high school, my friends and I had a place that felt like it belonged only to us. It was an old baseball field tucked behind an abandoned grade school, far away from the main road. Everyone expected the place to be bulldozed one day, but it never happened. Our town was too broke, and the location was too useless for anyone to care. The school sat right against the woods, away from neighborhoods and away from people. That distance made it perfect for us because nobody ever came there. Some kids broke into the school for graffiti, and sometimes cops chased them out. But the baseball field stayed untouched, like it was invisible. That field became our safe zone, the one place the world couldn't reach. It mattered because a lot of us didn't have good home lives. My friend Tim had it worse because his mom called the cops on him for anything. But when we were at the field, nobody could drag him back. We spent summer nights stretched across rusted bleachers, smoking and talking for hours. We laughed, told dumb stories, and watched the sky until it turned black. I loved that place more than I should have. We all did because it felt like freedom. But one detail about the field always creeped me out. There was a single lamppost near the bleachers that still worked. It cast a dull orange glow that never fully lit the area. It didn't make things safer, it only made us easier to see. Whenever I got too high, I stared into the woods surrounding the field. The darkness out there looked thick, like it could swallow anything. I'd think about someone standing out there watching us. The idea would twist my stomach, then I'd force myself to forget it. It happened at the beginning of summer, on a night Johnny and I planned to meet there. I arrived first, and his car wasn't in the lot. I told myself he was just running late. Still, being there alone made my chest feel tight. In our group, walking through those woods alone at night was basically taboo. We all acted tough, but we weren't stupid. I went anyway, because part of me liked the thrill. I walked past the abandoned school and followed the trail into the field. I waited 10 minutes, then 20, then 30. No headlights appeared and no text came through. The thrill died and turned into pure discomfort. I lit a cigarette and tried to pretend I wasn't nervous. Another 30 minutes passed and he still didn't show. I texted him again and again, but he never answered. My skin started crawling like something was near me. I finally decided I was done and headed back. I didn't walk back to my car, I jogged. Every few steps I felt like I needed to look behind me. I unlocked my door with shaking hands and sat there breathing hard. I waited a little longer, then drove home. The next morning, Johnny still hadn't replied. I was annoyed, but not worried yet. Later that day, my mom asked me if I'd seen him recently. The way she said it made my stomach drop. I called my friends, but none of them had heard from him. The last time any of us saw Johnny was 2 nights ago at the field. A day passed, then another day passed. Soon the entire town knew he was missing. Search parties started forming all over town. People walked the woods with flashlights calling his name. My friends and I joined, even though we were just kids. But nobody found him, not even a trace. Johnny's body was never recovered. Not a phone, not a shoe, not a scrap of clothing. For a while, I tried to believe he ran away. He talked about leaving town and traveling the world all the time, but deep down I knew he wouldn't disappear like that. If Johnny left, he would have left something behind. A note, a message, a sign for us to find. The silence felt wrong, like a door slammed shut. About a month later, I went back to the field alone. I was angry at the world and didn't care what happened to me. I walked through the woods like I had nothing to lose. Then I reached the edge of the field and froze. There were people sitting on the bleachers. At first I thought it was my friends, but it wasn't. I had never seen these people before in my life. 3 of them sat perfectly still, like statues. Then I saw the 4th one, and my blood went cold. He wasn't sitting, he was moving around the field. He was dancing and skipping like he was celebrating something. The happiness on his face felt unnatural and sick. I couldn't place his face, but my mind recognized him. It was like seeing someone from a dream you don't remember. The confusion made my head spin. I backed away quietly and left without making noise. When I reached my car, my hands were shaking. My first instinct was to drive away and never look back. But something made me circle the school lot first. That decision almost made me throw up. In the back corner of the parking lot, I saw a car. I recognized the model immediately because Johnny drove one just like it. The second my headlights swept across it, the car's lights turned on, like someone inside had been waiting. I slammed into reverse and sped out of there. I didn't stop until I was far away from the school. My heart was pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. That night I knew something was seriously wrong. As the summer went on, I couldn't get those people out of my head. I told my friends what I saw, but they brushed it off. They agreed it was creepy, but they didn't think it mattered. I stopped going to the field completely. In late July, I was feeling nostalgic and sick with grief. I pulled out the yearbook just to distract myself. I flipped pages, trying to remember better times. That's when I saw him. In the background of a sports photo, there was a janitor. The moment I saw his face, I knew it was the dancing man. Same hair, same expression, same eyes, my whole body went cold. I told my friends, but they didn't know what to do. Eventually, I went to the cops. They listened like they didn't believe me, but they took the name. Later, they told me they couldn't find anything about him. They said he had no real records. Even his social security number didn't lead anywhere. It was like the man didn't exist at all. That scared me more than I wanted to admit. A person shouldn't be able to vanish from paperwork. Near the end of summer, I went back to the field with a few friends. But the place didn't feel safe anymore. The orange light felt like a spotlight, not comfort. Every time I looked into the woods, I felt watched. I wanted the old feeling back, the one where the field felt like home, but it was gone forever. That night I knew I would never return. When we left, it felt like escaping something. A few days later, early in the morning, I stopped at a Dunkin' Donuts. I was half asleep until I saw him. The dancing man was there, looking exactly the same. For a second I thought my mind was lying to me. But then he looked right at me. He smiled like he recognized me. That smile felt personal, like he knew what I knew. Then he hurried out of the store. I followed him outside without thinking. Before I could reach him, a car pulled up at the curb. One of his buddies was driving, waiting for him. The dancing man jumped in and they sped off. But as the car passed, I saw the license plate. I recognized it instantly because Johnny used to brag about it. It was unique, impossible to forget. The plate read, 4-pack 207. My blood turned to ice. That wasn't just a random plate, it was Johnny's. That wasn't just a similar car, it was his car. They had repainted it, and that's why I didn't realize it earlier. I never saw that man again. I never saw the car again either. Johnny was never found, and nothing was ever explained. Now it's all just a memory that still makes me sick. Rest in peace, Johnny. I'm sorry we didn't understand what was happening. I'm sorry we didn't look harder when we still had time. And I'm sorry that place still exists, waiting in the dark. It was the summer of 2024, and me and my 3 friends, Jake, Sam, and Marcus, were desperate for a break from our internship at the Kennedy Space Center. We'd spent weeks buried in rocket data, staring at numbers until our eyes hurt. All 4 of us were obsessed with astronomy, and we were craving one perfect night under a truly dark sky. We wanted stars so clear it felt like we could reach up and touch them. We pulled up light pollution maps and satellite views, searching for the darkest patch of Florida we could find. A swampy and isolated stretch of the Panhandle. We told ourselves ghost stories were for kids, and we were only going there to stargaze. We booked a cozy Airbnb cabin near Apalachicola, about 30 miles from the forest's edge. It felt like the perfect safe spot, warm and quiet, far from work stress. After work on Friday, we packed blankets, snacks, and a telescope into 2 cars. There was no camping gear, because the plan was to return to the cabin before sunrise. The drive was long and exhausting, nearly 7 hours from the Space Center. By the time we reached the Airbnb, we were drained, but still excited. We dropped our bags inside, grabbed a quick snack, and didn't waste time resting. Within minutes, we were back on the road, chasing the night sky. The deeper we drove, the worse the roads became. Pavement turned into dirt, and dirt turned into narrow trails twisting through thick pine trees and murky wetlands. The air was heavy with humidity, and cicadas screamed nonstop in the darkness. Every so often we heard splashes in the swamp water like something was moving just out of sight. Then our phones lost signal completely and the screen showed nothing but no service. That's when we switched to walkie-talkies to stay connected between cars. Their crackling voices felt strange in that kind of darkness, like we were in some forgotten place. Even though we joked around, I could feel tension slowly building in my stomach. The moment we stepped out, the sky above us looked unreal. Stars covered everything, bright and sharp, like the universe was showing off. For a few minutes, it felt peaceful, and we forgot about the forest around us. We spread out blankets and set up the telescope, pointing out constellations like excited kids. That's when Sam's voice hissed through the walkie-talkie from the Mustang. He sounded tense when he said, "Yo, you see those headlights?" A faint glow was creeping down the trail we'd driven in on, slow and steady. Whoever was coming had a reason, and it didn't feel like a good one. I flicked the Tesla's headlights 3 sharp times, and the glow ahead stopped. As the vehicle came into view, we saw it was an old pickup truck, rusty and battered. It halted about 100 yards away without honking or waving, just idling in silence. Then the driver door opened and a shadowy figure stepped out. A second figure followed, and maybe even a third, but it was hard to tell in the glare. They didn't walk toward us or speak to us at all. They just stood there, staring like we were trespassing. That's when we heard voices drifting through the swamp. They were low, garbled whispers that didn't sound close, but didn't sound far either. I couldn't understand any words, yet the sound made my skin crawl. Marcus's voice crackled through the radio saying, "This is messed up." Sam sounded even more scared when he mentioned the voices again. He said nobody should be out there at 2 a.m. unless they were doing something bad. I swung my flashlight toward the truck, but the beam died before it reached them. The whispers kept going, soft and sinister, like they were coming from the trees themselves. Jake tried to keep everyone calm and suggested we move to another spot. We all agreed quickly, but made one clear rule between us. If those headlights showed up again, we were leaving immediately. No debate, no stargazing, and no second chances. We packed up fast and drove a mile down a side trail, away from the main path. But this time, the stars didn't feel relaxing at all. They made us feel exposed, like we were sitting under a spotlight. We barely had 5 minutes before Marcus's voice came through again, urgent and sharp. "They're back," he said, and my heart dropped. Then the truck's engine revved hard, like it was warning us. Sam didn't hesitate and told us to get out immediately. We didn't fold blankets or grab snacks properly, we just ran. Jake and I jumped into the Tesla while Marcus and Sam slammed into the Mustang. I floored it, and the Tesla jolted over roots and branches as if the forest was trying to grab us. In my rearview mirror, those headlights locked onto us like a predator. The high beams were blinding, and they were too close for comfort. Jake shouted into the walkie-talkie asking Marcus if they were okay. Marcus replied breathless, saying they were barely holding on and the truck was right behind them. That's when it hit me how helpless we really were. We were 4 young interns, basically defenseless, with no signal and no help for miles. At 2 a.m. in a place called Tate's Hell, you don't meet friendly strangers. I pushed the Tesla harder, feeling my pulse in my throat. The trail twisted sharply, and for a second the truck's headlights disappeared. I felt hope rise in my chest, thinking we'd finally lost them. But moments later they returned, closer again, like they were playing with us. It felt like they wanted us terrified, not caught quickly. We reached a fork in the trail and I swerved left, praying it led to the main road. The truck followed instantly, never hesitating. My hands were locked on the steering wheel so tight they ached. The forest blurred past, and every bump felt like the car might lose control. Then the dirt road suddenly changed into pavement beneath the tires. A faded highway sign appeared ahead, and it felt like salvation. I glanced back one more time, expecting those headlights to be there. But the truck was gone, as if it had vanished into the darkness. Marcus pulled his Mustang up beside us, and we stopped on the shoulder, shaking. None of us spoke for a long moment, just breathing hard and staring into the trees. The only sound left was crickets and the faint crackle of the walkie-talkies. It felt like the forest was watching us even now. The drive back to the Airbnb was completely silent. When we got inside the cabin, we locked the door and checked the windows twice. Even with walls around us, it didn't feel safe anymore. That night had changed the way the world felt. We tried to explain what happened with different possibilities. Maybe they were poachers or drug runners or people hiding something illegal in the swamp. Or maybe it was connected to those whispers and the old legends. Whatever it was, they didn't chase us like a prank, they chased us like fear was the goal. We never went back to Tate's Hell after that. We don't talk about it at the Space Center, and we don't tell most people about it. But sometimes when I'm driving lonely Florida roads at night, I catch myself checking my mirrors too often. Because a part of me is still out there, running through the dark, listening for whispers in the swamp. In November 2024, I took a 3-week vacation to South Korea. My family owns a secluded guest house near the mountain town of Pyeongchang in Gangwon Province. It's a traditional hillside lodge built beside a narrow river called the Hanyul Stream. The locals say the land around it has been sacred for centuries. My father once told me something strange about that place. During construction, workers uncovered old stone pillars and carved blocks buried deep in the soil. According to a local historian, a hidden shrine stood there around the 10th century. I hadn't visited the lodge in nearly 14 years, so I was excited to experience it again. I've always loved exploring unknown areas. Remembering my father's story, I decided to hike off trail in the forest below the lodge. I wanted to see if I could find traces of the ancient ruins he mentioned. The idea felt like a private adventure waiting for me. When I reached the city of Chuncheon, I rented a car near the station. Heavy snow was falling and the roads were packed with slow traffic. The trip should have taken about an hour, but it took nearly 2. By the time I arrived, it was already around 8:30 p.m. The lodge was almost completely empty in winter. Hardly any tourists come to this region during the snowy season. There was no staff inside, not even a caretaker. I was completely alone in a massive building surrounded by mountains. The silence felt unreal, like the whole place was holding its breath. I found spare keys behind the reception counter and unlocked a suite for myself. The hallways echoed with every footstep I took. That night, I slept with the strange feeling that the building was listening. The next morning, I headed into the forest below the lodge. Snow covered the ground up to my ankles, and walking downhill was exhausting. The terrain was rough, slippery, and uneven in every direction. After about an hour, I realized I had no idea where I was. I pulled out my phone, but there was no signal. Trees surrounded me like a wall, blocking out the sky. Straight ahead was a steep hill that rose above everything else. I figured if I reached the top, I might spot a road or any sign of civilization. The climb was brutal and dangerous. The hill was rocky, steep, and partially frozen. Then I noticed something on the left side, what looked like an old trail. It was faint, but it was clearly not natural. I carefully made my way toward it. The path was narrow and covered with dead branches and snow. It twisted upward like it had been forgotten for decades. Somehow, I managed to follow it to the top, but at the summit, the trail suddenly ended. There was no continuation, no clearing, nothing. I turned in circles, confused and irritated. That's when I saw a dark gap in the hillside above the path. It was hidden behind thick bushes and vines. The opening looked like a small cavity in the rock, about 5 meters away. I climbed up slowly and brushed aside the vegetation. What I found made my stomach tighten instantly. It was the entrance to a small cave. Mud had washed into the opening, but it was wide enough to crawl through. I pulled out a flashlight and shined it inside. The beam revealed a shallow alcove and another opening to the left. The moment I stepped in, a smell hit me hard. It was like the odor of a wild animal trapped in a cage. The air felt stale, heavy, and wrong. My throat tightened as if the cave itself was rotten. The alcove was mostly empty, except for a large rectangular stone block in the center. It looked placed there intentionally, like an altar. I walked deeper, my footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The cave opened into a larger chamber ahead. Inside the chamber, I saw 2 narrow tunnels branching off to the sides. I didn't want to explore them because the darkness felt too thick. On the far end of the chamber was another stone block, but this one looked hollow. It resembled a crude stone coffin. I stepped closer and pointed my flashlight inside. My entire body froze the second I saw what was in there. Human bones were piled inside the hollow space. Alongside them lay an old metal rod and several ancient coins with square holes. For a few seconds, I couldn't even breathe properly. My brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. I felt sick, dizzy, and fascinated at the same time. Without thinking, I reached in and grabbed one of the coins. It was corroded and rough, but symbols were still visible. I wanted to inspect it properly, but before I could, a loud crash echoed from one of the side tunnels. The sound was heavy, like something slamming into stone. My flashlight jerked toward the darkness instantly. That animal-like stench became stronger in seconds. It felt so thick that breathing became difficult. My hands started shaking uncontrollably. Instinctively, I grabbed the metal rod near the bones and raised it like a weapon. Under the flashlight, it looked like the remains of a long blade. The metal was dull and stained, but it had a sharp shape. I held it with one hand and slowly backed away. My eyes stayed locked on the tunnel entrance. Then the smell changed. Beneath the stench, I could smell smoke like burnt wood. A rhythmic thumping began deep in the tunnel. It sounded like a drum being beaten in a slow, steady pattern. That's when panic took over completely. I turned and ran toward the cave entrance. My boots slipped on mud as I scrambled forward. Behind me, I swear the entire cave started vibrating. The walls trembled like something massive was moving inside. I burst out of the opening and fell onto the snowy slope. The blade slipped from my hand and disappeared into the snow. I didn't stop to look back even once. I ran downhill through dead branches and frozen bush. Twigs snapped against my face and arms as I pushed through. My lungs burned and my legs felt like they would collapse. Still, I kept running like something was right behind me. Eventually, I heard a car in the distance. That sound felt like salvation. I stumbled out onto the side of a road, shaking and out of breath. I collapsed in the snow and tried to calm my heart. A vehicle approached and I waved desperately. The driver slowed down but looked suspicious at first. When he saw my face and how terrified I was, he opened the door. I climbed inside and couldn't stop trembling. Through broken conversation, I learned I was far from the lodge. The driver said I was nearly 6 kilometers away. He drove me back without asking too many questions. When I arrived, I felt no relief, only fear. I went straight to my room and packed everything quickly. Being alone in that lodge suddenly felt like the worst idea imaginable. I didn't even bother staying another hour. I drove back to Chunchin and checked into a hotel for the night. But the story didn't end there. In February, when the lodge reopened for visitors, my father sent me a disturbing message. He said someone broke into the building through a first-floor window. Nothing valuable was stolen and nothing else was damaged. Except one thing. The front door of my suite had been smashed wide open. It looked like it had been hit repeatedly with a heavy metal object. After hearing that, I knew one thing for sure: I will never stay there again.